If the customer is there and they're interested, it's sort of on you to make it happen. But don't take the bait. They might want to fight you on price, but it's a really bad idea to get deep into that kind of a tit for tat sort of thing. And these price discussions, they really shouldn't be the zero sum game that they're perceived as. They're part of a more complex give and take negotiation. That's what we want to get to. Plug your nose. We're talking about negotiating on price and the popular stigma around it. Turns out haggling on price and negotiating on price are very different things. In episode 3 of season 3 in our negotiation elevation series, we tackle why talking about price is awkward and how we can shift to a constructive negotiation from a hostile price haggle. Hello, folks. I'm Dave. He's Chris. This is Startup Different. It's a podcast, and we're happy to see you here today. We're very excited on this next episode. It's a lot of fun, even though it might give a few people here listening the heebie-jeebies. We're talking about price negotiations and why you should love them. And I want to start this a little bit more on a different way of introducing it. Chris, why did you get a Tesla?
Because I could just buy it online and I didn't have to go to a dealership and haggle with a sales rep at the dealership. Every time I bought a car, it's always an awful experience. I just hate it. Do you want the undercoating, the rust proofing?
I did that. I did do the rust proofing with my old Nissan Rogue,
Isn't that a scam?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I didn't rust.
I don't know. I don't know if that's just
you gotta go to
scam.
You got to go to the upsell room, right? After you have you agree to buy the car, and they're like, okay, now you need to talk to the manager. Here's your next level, second level salesperson, and their job is just the upsell, just the additional stuff. And it's all these things that you have no way of measuring or understanding, but they cost money.
Yeah, why is it like that? So I bought a Tesla because I was just I can just go online and order this thing and then go pick it up and drive away. And, yes, that's what I wanted. I could avoid this awkwardness of actually having to haggle about price. Because I think the other thing too is that when I go to a car dealership and I negotiate for a car, I pretty much know I'm going to get ripped off. I know that they're doing it many times a day, and I don't do it maybe once every a decade. So they're just gonna crush me. So anyways, that's why I bought a Tesla, because at least I know everybody else is paying the price that's on the website.
It actually reminds me of kind of a silly story. My father-in-law, he would go and find the MSRP for whatever car model he wanted to buy. And usually it was the latest year, Civic, Honda Civic. That was it's just his go. He's a man of habits, and he just wants this car again. He's had this car in some form for the past probably 30 years, and he will find the MSRP somewhere online, some random website, and manufactured suggested retail price. And he will go and he'll walk into the dealership and say, hey, "This is what I'm willing to pay you." And they'll say, "Whoa. Well, we need some margin, right? Because they're not doing it for no reason." And so he'll say, "Okay, well, I'll give you 5%." And then they close the deal and they're out of there, and he has nothing to say to them. And that's the transaction.
He wasn't talking MSRP. He was actually talking about the wholesale price. He would find the wholesale price online somewhere, right? The dealer cost.
Yeah, the dealer.
And then go in and say, "This is what I'm willing to pay you." So
you're right. Even cheaper than I was just suggesting.
Yeah. So he was doing the ultimate anchor the negotiation really low right away, right?
Because he just hated the discussion. He just because he was so worried about being had. He's so worried he would do that level of research before walking in there, even though he knows he wants that car. And if they didn't give him the deal, he would go to the next Honda dealership and he would communicate that to them too. He'd say, "If you don't give me this deal, I'm going to go to the next Honda. I'll drive 50 kilometers to get that, get that deal."
I feel like this is another one of those cultural things where he grew up in a culture where they were better at this than me. Right. Yeah. Where I would go and I would pay the sticker price or whatever. And then I would probably get upsold for the rust coating or undercoating and all those other weird things that I didn't totally need. at all either. So yeah, I think there's some cultural aspect to this too.
I think it's that Eastern European vibe, man. They are just so direct and they know exactly what they want and they're gonna get it. You know what I
They
mean?
don't care if the like car salesman likes them or not.
No,
Whereas
there's no concern around. There's no Canadian or Pacific Northwest niceties, about the negotiation or the haggling. And so, it's funny though. My wife, also Eastern European, it's funny. She actually has a visceral hatred though of the negotiation as well. She, and what's interesting about it is because, and I asked her about it before the episode, is that it's because it's not a negotiation. It's often just perceived as haggling. And so this is an interesting thing that we want to hit on today, which is like what the difference is there between a haggling and a true negotiation, and how we can get to a negotiation. We don't like haggling. Haggling is bad. We're going to go deep in that in a few minutes. But it's really my wife's least favorite thing. It's right up there with like hangnails and canker sores. And she's not alone. Like really, think of yourself or my father-in-law, so her father. In Western societies, like talking about the price is often met with like fear, anxiety, and in some cases like borderline open hostility, like my father-in-law there. So here's the thing though, is you don't actually need to shy away from price negotiations. They can be good things. I don't know, car sales notwithstanding. We'll talk about how you could maybe get there. It depends how willing they are to tango with you, and that's obviously important in any negotiation. But if the customer is there and they're interested, it's sort of on you to make it happen. But don't take the bait. They might want to fight you on price, but it's a really bad idea to get deep into that kind of a tit for tat sort of thing. And these price discussions, they really shouldn't be the zero sum game that they're perceived as. They're part of a more complex give and take negotiation. That's what we want to get to. And so I guess our myth here for today is that, you need to shower after a price negotiation, or that, you can only win on price by sort of crushing the other side, by, really making sure that you're not paying a cent more. There's more to be had here. And so I want to go really deep on this haggling versus negotiation piece first. So how do you understand, if you just a hot take, Chris, what do you think of, like, when you think haggling versus negotiating, what does it sound like to you?
Sounds like haggling is just like literally we're just arguing about the price. There's no other real
arguing is a good use of term there,
right?
Specifically,
right.
It's a fight, right? Like it's not really collaborative. And yes, it's just about one thing, right?
Yeah. Whereas I feel like negotiations is more like there are other factors at play. There are other give and takes that can happen around that price negotiation. So I don't know. Maybe it's like you're buying the car and like, hey, I can't give you a discount on the car, but I'll throw in the rust proofing for free or something like that.
Right.
Like, that kind of stuff.
That's the idea. And if they're not willing to give you access or visibility on what those other variables could be, then you're by design stuck in a fight over a price, and that people just don't like that. And we'll go deep in that in just a second. And I suppose too, it's that on the pricing is that if you think of your ZOPA, your zone of potential agreement between the two parties, there's really only one avenue. It's a game of tug of war. There's only one rope and you're both pulling as hard as you can, and you stand to gain or lose depending on how hard the team pulls. By contrast though, the negotiation, it kind of as we've alluded to in the first two episodes of this series, is that negotiations are more complicated, but invite more opportunity for collaboration and compromise. You can imagine it more as a game of Connect Four. Okay, so Connect Four, right?
Yeah, I think I played that when I was a kid or something.
yeah. It's been a few years, but
I
actually love Connect Four, but it is, for some reason, it feels really bad when you lose Connect Four. You feel really dumb. But
you drop like the little discs into the slots and they fall down, and you have to get 4 in a row, and it's either like flat or vertical or like,
or it can be like diagonal or whatever. But you got to get them. You got to get 4 in a row, right?
Okay,
and
gotcha.
So there's actually 7 columns. Okay, so I like to think of the columns as the different things that you care about in a negotiation. So you've got your price. Let's just go to a software example just to make this easier. You got your price, your deployment time frame. You got your legal concessions, resource availability, so like people being available for it, yada yada yada. So you got all these different things you care about. You're dropping pieces into the table, and you'll probably have a strategy in Connect 4. You'll be like, okay, I'm starting to get ahead on this one side of the board. Can I set it up for somewhere else so I get my full Connect 4? And if you think about those chips that you're dropping in there, those are the things that you care about more. and you're trying to build that up, and you're going to get your 4 across the board. But it's more complicated is the real crux of what I'm trying to get here. In the end, your Connect 4 might look horizontal because it's totally level and you cared about everything equally, or maybe you were diagonal and something did better and something did worse. In some cases, maybe you have one thing that you really, really care about. So it's like this like never happens in Connect 4. Like nobody has 4 in a row vertically. Like that's insane. But theoretically, it could happen. And the idea is, though, that is your caring level on these different items. So you're giving and getting on some of these things. But with these price hagglings, it's really difficult because it's just that one issue. So why is it so weird and difficult and awkward to talk about pricing? And it's funny, even in these institutional sales that I would do, enterprise level sales, it wasn't even their money. It wasn't even the money of like the person on the other side. It wasn't coming out of their pocket. It was the organization's money.
But it might have been their budget though, right? Like it might have been the pool of money that their like department had to spend. So in a way, it was actually their money. Yeah.
In effect, I guess it was kind of their money. But I mean, like, not
really.
It feels different when it's coming out of your wallet, or you have to get your credit card out to buy it, or maybe you're buying a house and you have to carry like what do they call those things? Like this, like a certified check or like a bank draft, and it's like hot money. And you're trying to like
you don't want to
the lawyer.
You have some personal safety concerns.
Like you need like a bodyguard because you're carrying like,
somebody should build
$100,000.
Maybe somebody should build an app for personal safety when you're carrying your check to pay for your
to the people of App Armor. We have this is salespeople of App Armor. Listen quickly, Motorola. Anyway, so we don't talk about money because we don't like to. And it's definitely a faux pas anyway in society. It's just something you just don't talk about. And you can really only haggle in particular situations. So like car sales, for example, sometimes it's for like dumb products like appliances or like things like of that nature. And most of the time people hate the game of it. So like I don't like it either. Sometimes I find it fun depending on the personality on the other side because I enjoy this sort of thing and I'm a weirdo. But most people don't actually enjoy these experiences. And the people are worried about what they're paying versus the value you're getting. And if you haggle poorly, you'll feel dumb that you didn't get the best value. It really hurts when somebody comes to you and says, so you buy a car and everybody always goes, oh, what'd you pay for the car? And if they have the same car as you and they paid less, you're going to feel really stupid. It's like the worst interaction ever, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you went to Tesla, because you knew you're going to get what you're going to get, for the most part. Like it doesn't dynamically price, does it?
Yeah, actually, I was just going to say, so I know when I bought it, I know what I paid, but I get all the like Google News feeds about Tesla stuff, and I know they've like dropped the price on it. So like, but at the same time,
you're talking about the moment though. Like there's a relative, like, people who bought Netflix 10 years ago are probably being grandfathered in paying a hell of a lot less than people now, right?
Dude, I don't know if Netflix does that. I think they changed the price on people.
Oh. Theoretically, this could exist.
But like I bought it, whatever, a year ago, and all the people that bought it that month basically paid the same equivalent price based on the features that I got.
Right.
So like I don't feel like I was ripped off. Whereas I feel like if you go to a regular car dealership, you can have 2 identical cars and one person comes in and buys it, pays the sticker price, me, and then next person comes in, like your father-in-law, haggles like crazy and gets a way better deal on the exact same car, like the exact same day. So I guess that's the feeling that I'm.
And that's going back to last episode when we talked about this perceived injustice. That is an injustice. And you really don't like it. And it makes you feel had. It's deception. It's all these like bad faith levels of negotiation and haggling that's really, or it's not even negotiation, of bargaining and haggling that's really, really annoying and frustrating and scary. It's information asymmetry. The seller knows what it costs, their bottom line, and you know what you're willing to pay. But no matter what, you probably feel like you've been taken for a ride, just staying on metaphor here with cars. So another example I like to think of too, I remember this was many years ago, pterodactyls roamed the earth. And I was in high school going to Europe on a school trip. And there are those guys who set up and they've got a bunch of junk, frankly, like the fake Rolexes and like little Eiffel Towers and stuff they sell. They're like sitting on the ground. They got a big tarp and you haggle with them. They expect to haggle with you. And I really wasn't prepared for that. And I remember paying like 5-10 euros, which is a lot of dough for what is effectively something that's probably worth like 10 cents.
What did you get? Like a fake Rolex or something, or
I don't think I got a Rolex. I think
like
I got
something cool? Hopefully.
I think I got a little Colosseum when I was in Rome, like a little tiny one. And I
Why?
paid like a lot of money for it. Okay. And so it was, and then I remember seeing, actually, interestingly enough, one of my classmates was Eastern European. And I just realized that now. And she was, and you could tell she knew how to negotiate because the person was like, oh, this costs 10 euros. And she's like, that's outrageous. I'm just leaving now. And the guy's like, okay, hold up. We can work on, like they expect the fight. And, but I just couldn't do it. And it was really annoying. So I really hated that feeling of being had. And then there's all like the faux rudeness, like it's outrageous. And like all these things that I just didn't know. Like you're acting, it's more of a game of deception, and hiding than it is truly collaborative and work together. So that's why people hate it. People hate it because of that. So we want to get away from haggling. We want to get shifting to a price negotiation. So how do we do that? And this is going to take some of the lessons that we had in our previous episodes as well. And then I'm going to get really tactical, and I want to address a few like specific business examples that came up for us. So first off, as usual, it's about the conditioning and expectation setting. Even if you're haggling, you still want to set the table with a budget at least, or time constraints. You can actually make a haggle. Let's go back to our Europe example. If I wanted to buy the fake Rolex, I could say to them, okay, they say, well, it costs 10 euros. And I say, well, I only have 5. And then they might say, okay, well, it's 5 euros. I'm like, I don't know. I think you can do better. They'll be like, well, you said you had 5. I'll be like, well, I got to go in a few minutes. Okay. So you've added a time constraint. Okay. So you can, bring in other stuff to kind of influence the main discussion around price. It doesn't always work, right? I'm not going to say that works perfectly, but the idea is that you can at least put some pressure on the seller. It's you don't want to be a motivated buyer in that kind of environment, right? So, but I think the idea here is you're setting expectations for the other side so they know how to negotiate or haggle with you in that case. But fortunately in business, you're not usually negotiating over just one item, right? Even if there's and this could be internally too, the employee, let's say they want a raise or something. Well, the actual concern is money, and that can be addressed in different ways. Or maybe they just want time off. Time is also money, depending on how you phrase it to them and how you condition it and whether or not they buy it. But if you know what I mean. But the idea is there's other ways to resolve some of these problems. So it's unusual that you're just fighting over one single thing. So you can possibly get back to like other compromises or even reopen old items with a negotiating party if they're not willing to move on one single particular item. So if they're just being really stubborn, you have to do whatever you can to introduce more variables into the discussion, or you're just going to be at an impasse. You just can't get through it, right? Have you ever had that before where you've gotten really deadlocked on something?
Like, how terrible I am at especially price negotiations. Like I just don't do a ton of this stuff. Like I think that's one of the strengths of you and I running the business was that we had some skills that overlapped, but you could do this side of it. Whereas I knew I was not, made of the right material to do negotiation stuff. And that's why I think we were a good pair to run that company. But like, no, like I don't really remember any time. Like I usually just gave in if there was like a negotiation at some point. I really wanted the thing, I would probably just give in at some point. So yeah. And then, feel silly that I probably got taken, because I didn't push hard enough or something like that. So yeah, just like never had great, experiences with negotiations, so kind of shied away from it most of the time.
I think really you have to take what they're saying. So if they're just focusing on price and saying, look, introducing these other variables can make this as close to like a no lose scenario as possible. And there's actually great opportunity here for you to extract considerable value outside of the actual dollars and cents of the agreement itself. So I'll give you an example. And sometimes it can even look like you're caving to them, but we gave the University of Florida, because we didn't, I think we mentioned this in another episode too, but we didn't have that many clients in the United States. So we gave the University of Florida an amazing deal, unbelievable deal. For a school their size, they're probably paying like a 1/10 of what they were supposed to pay. And for no other, strictly speaking, like legal guarantees. There was nothing really in writing that we could really lean on. But what we got was something hugely important. We got an American customer that's highly referenceable in the United States, and actually I'd argue even outside of the United States, a lot of people know the Florida Gators if you're in that sort of thing, and in that vertical. And they're on our platform. They became a great use case example. They would, the university didn't come out and say, we love App Armor. They didn't do that. But when we needed a reference, they were more than happy to do it on other deals. If we were at a trade show and we saw them there, they were happy to talk to us, and they would talk to other customers about how great we were. And, of course, you're doing a lot of other work as a company to guarantee this good relationship. It's not just about the pricing negotiation, but it sets the tempo that, or at least it locks in the understanding that this is a valuable thing way beyond the dollars that we actually got. So you can actually gain a lot more on some of these pricing discussions than you think. And that's the one thing that you really need to do when we're shifting it to that negotiation, is to find that additional value, things that matter for your company.
Right on. Yeah. And that for that particular client, it was really that name recognition, because then we were like, it legitimized our business in that market. It was like, oh, we had a referenceable client that people knew about. They were doing great things, and they would give those they would take those reference calls, which was a huge deal for our business. Yeah. Absolutely.
You need references all the time too in enterprise sales. Like, I mean, aside from just like your smaller engagements, so you might have one organization say, hey, do you have any customers that we can talk to, and be like, yeah, here's the first one, it's University of Florida, here's the person, they're great, they're really, and that person, well, you've built a strong rapport, man, you're going to slam dunk the interaction with that new customer. But then there's also the RFP process, which is the request for proposals, these big proposals for really high value deals, and having good quality references absolutely carries a ton of weight, and it's so hard to get them early. It's so hard to have good references and win. You really can't win RFPs without a really good set of references. It's very unlikely. It's very difficult. So, now a couple of things I wanted to point out. So, and this is really tactical specifically. So let's say you're in a negotiating thing. This is for all my founders and salespeople out there. So if they're pushing, so the customer is pushing you on paying less, you've basically got one of two levers that you can pull, at least that I like to go to. So the first one is hold your ground. And you be like, what, Dave? What are you talking about? You said we're not fighting over price. We're not. We're going to hold our ground on price. Okay. So we're going to hold our position there. And this ties back to sort of episode 1 and the 5 whys. The price is a necessity. We're doing this so we can eat. I gotta eat. And sometimes I would say to people, hey, we're cutting this pretty thin. I'm not making a huge margin. I'm not retiring off this one. Sometimes you have to communicate to the other side that they're getting a deal. Otherwise, they will assume they're not. And this is really focused on the strength of your rapport with that customer. They're not gonna, if you're, I just want to say, if you've worked with a slimy sales guy before and they're like, you're getting a great deal here, where it's like, you're kind of like, you're not. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to describe this, but when those sorts of situations happen, it's not so fun. But, at the end of the day, you're not a charity. So it's also respect, right? Price is the number one indicator of quality. So if you really need to hold your ground, but if you hold your ground, you need to give them an out. That's how you get away from the haggling. So, you'd say something, we can't reduce the price, but we'll throw in this module. So we used to have an additional module that was called Work Alone. And it was for basically a safety check-in system through the mobile app. And it was a premium module. People would pay more for it. Schools would, or organizations. So I would throw that in sometimes, because I knew that on our side, it wasn't a huge cost to us to do that. And it was very valuable to them. It's a cool module. It's another thing that makes the app more marketable, which also has spin-off benefits to us. More people would use the app. It would be a bigger part of their university or college or corporate or healthcare community or whatever. It was actually had other benefits that were beyond the dollar values there. So
yeah. So even though you gave that feature away, you were able to maintain the price, but you were also able to ensure that app would get used a lot and be more sticky in their community. It was a win-win-win. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody wins. It was definitely a solid, we did really well in those scenarios. Those were the best. They wouldn't always do that. I would just say though, that, by the way, that's called the additive. We're adding something to the deal that wasn't in the original scope. That's just, the cherry on top, something to make them feel special.
Cool. And so that's hold your ground. What's the other way?
The other option is you give them the price concession, but as we sort of covered, we get something else. So a good example is the multi-year deal. So I would do this all the time. Yeah, you want to do you want to pay 10% less? No problem, but we're locking you into a 3-year contract.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to do a 5-year contract? We can do even less than that. But there's a 5-year contract and it's pretty firm. And if you can leave at any time, but you have to pay the full value of the contract. So no matter what, I'm getting my 5 years out of that because I made that negotiation. That was the point of the negotiation. That's what I got. I can't lose that. So you call that a poison pill in the contract. Some lawyers will try to strike that. You have to go back to them and say, no, this was negotiated. This is part of the deal. They know that they're getting 15% off for a 5-year deal. And God damn it, I'm gonna have the 5-year poison pill in there for sure.
You did most of these deals, and I remember there were times where like they would say, yeah, we want the like 5-year price, but we want like we can quit on 30 days notice. It's like it doesn't work that way.
Sounds nice. That sounds like a free discount.
Anyways,
for sure.
Yeah.
So buyers sort of have a saying on this, and I think this should be your guiding principle too, which is trade, don't cave. Okay, so you're getting something. And another note on competitors. So this is another sort of functional, like tactical piece. If the customer comes back to you and says, well, vendor B, maybe a very common competitor of yours, is charging X amount less, you have sort of two options here. So first is the price match. Okay, so price match because you're a keener. Did this a lot in the early days. What you're doing is you're eliminating pricing as a differentiator point between you and the other vendor. Right. You do this when they're lower than you, and you probably really want that deal. The thing is, that has limits. Now, we had competitors that would give away a certain number of licenses or whatever for free. I'm not going to price match on 0. And I would tell this to people too. I'm like, well, if you're buying something for if you're getting for $0, you're going to get $0 level quality. Okay. Yeah. And this brings us to the second point, which is holding your ground again, because your product is worth what it's worth and it's different from your competition. And partially, this is the point of any sales engagement, is to prove the value. This is the value of the product. And for them, sometimes it's not even actually about the dollars. It's like a test of character or a test of credibility in you and your faith in your product and your company than an actual concern on price.
Like signaling that, no, our product is better than the other one. We're holding our ground because we know you can't get what ours does from somebody else. And I think that is interesting. And I think we definitely had that happen at times.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so just kind of wrapping this up. So how seriously, some things to consider too. How seriously do you take them? These customers, like, are they very, very important? And a lot of these answers are context specific. Are they going to be really important to your business later? So University of Florida is really important to our business. So we came way down in price. We told them it was a special discount because it was a competitive knockout discount. We just made it up because we needed to give them credibility around our price. If they thought the product just costed $3,000, they'd be like, why? Why is it so cheap? Or as an example. And I think what we wanted to say is like, well, it's cheap for a reason. And it's because we really want you. And you're in this special circumstance where you get a special discount from our company.
Yeah.
Right.
I think, that's one of those things when you talked about price negotiations, sometimes you kind of have to manufacture the reason that you're going to give a discount so that you're not just like giving a discount for nothing. So the competitive knockout was actually something I think we used a lot. Like when we got into a competitive situation and we were like, okay, they've got an existing app. They're not necessarily too happy with that client or that vendor. We really want to get that deal. I think during our like 10 years of running App Armor, I think we had at one point like probably about 12 other competitors that gradually over time like kind of lost ground and disappeared from the market. I remember taking like the final client from certain of them, and sort of finishing them off.
Well, so Florida was like that too. Actually, University of Florida had a competitive solution.
That's right. They were one of them, actually. And I think when we won that deal, then that other competitor was just like, well, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to do other things. So that actually worked out really well for us because you not only get a big client, but then you also like eliminate a competitor from the market. Which
like
is
Rochester
awesome.
Institute of Technology, Virginia Tech, University of Florida, like just a couple of the ones
Vanderbilt.
where we took, like where you take it. Yeah, that's right. It's important. But anyway, good examples. That takes me back to some fun times for sure.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up. Haggling is a tug of war. Negotiations is a game of Connect 4. That almost rhymes, kind of rhymes. But so remember, it's more complicated. We actually want to introduce more variables to make it more complicated in a good way. So, and talking about price is taboo. So we value consistency. So know your weaknesses in these situations. Just be aware of your own biases, whether they're cultural or whatever, that you're going to act differently and feel more uncomfortable in certain circumstances. Move to a negotiation, again, by introducing those variables, and trade, don't cave. Make sure you're getting something. And we gave you some good examples here at the end of the episode today. So that's it. That's the third episode of the season. We have our special guest coming next week. We are very excited to speak to them. Keep an eye out for that. And thank you so much for joining us today on Startup Different. I'm Dave. He's Chris. We'll catch you next week. Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, subscribe to and rate Startup Different in your favorite podcast app. If you want to see our radio faces, check us out on YouTube at Startup Different and look us up on social. We're probably there if you are. And lastly, do you want to feature your startup on the show? Reach out via our website, startupdifferent.com. See you next time.